Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Dr. Daigle. He is a chiropractor and he speaks about neurological rehab with patients dealing with traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, children with development delays, professional athletes, chronic illnesses, and business executives. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thank you. Thank you, AJ.
You are welcome to the show. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure a lot of people across the world will benefit from what we are talking about. We'll be talking about how light influences the brain. And we'll get a better understanding from this. Who better than you who knows about these things? You have been a chiropractor. You know about these things. And now you are very much into, light solution that can impact positively a lot of situations. So my first understanding question to you to understand, Dr. Kyle, is one thing. Normally people say this light is not good. Phone light you should avoid. Early in the morning you should avoid. And that this light you should. So how do people understand about light? If phone light can be so bad, then what light is good? Sunlight, people used to say it gives us a lot of things. Then people started saying, oh, this light can be good. You can get sunburn and so many things. And so it's a all confusing state of affairs. Help us understand about these light, what light is good, what light is bad. So a general person can come out of the confusion and find himself in the light of knowledge.
Okay, so I think the first thing starts with, and my understanding was really studying physics. And Albert Einstein came up with an amazing equation, E equals mc squared. And I think when you break this down, you have energy equals M stands for mass, which is every cell in your body is considered an atom. And you multiply that by the speed of light. But there's different variations of wavelengths. So there's different colors. And when you look at a human being in today's society all over the world, you think about these patients that are having to take a lot of coffee. They're drinking lots of caffeine, energy drinks, because they don't have a lot of energy. And then you basically figure out, well, why? And it's because, one, people are staying indoors all day long. Our main source of light is actually coming from artificial light. We're seeing it from screens. People are working inside in cubicles all day long under artificial LED lights. And so what's happening is people are only being exposed to really one color, and that's the color blue. And so it's shown that, there's certain benefits of blue light that it can actually increase and kind of alert you. But people aren't being exposed to the variation of color or wavelengths. So you have to think about, one, people are having insomnia. They can't sleep. People are gaining a lot of weight. We're seeing people have, psychiatric disorders, bipolar, ADHD. We're seeing a crazy increase in autistic kids. And we're seeing people chronically sick. And they all have fatigue issues. They're all, have no energy. So what I basically understood in this concept was I started studying their circadian rhythm, basically how the body actually, functions based off of light. And it's actually light penetrate to the back of the eye. And so myself personally, I had issues with sleep. And what I found is that I read a lot. I stayed inside a lot. And then as I started studying the circadian rhythm, I started seeing that the sunrise actually would set your basically alarm clock for the body. It would actually help you metabolize and break down food. It would give you energy. And it would also give you something called beta endorphins, which relax you. It makes you happy, makes you feel good. It actually is even an anesthetic. It reduces pain. So I basically went into this whole thing about trying to figure out, how potentially could I use light to potentially heal people. And I actually found that using the color red was amazing. And it was based off of the sun. So I started studying and started applying red light to my patients. And it was actually first starting at actually just putting light like on the actual neck, light on the face, light on the head. And I started noticing that these patients started feeling better. Their pain started to go down. Even patients with spinal cord injury started to move their legs. So then I started getting diving in deeper into actually studying the actual skull. And we actually have what's called chromophores. They're light receptors. And so when you're outside in the sun, it's very interesting, but light, especially red wavelengths, it increases blood flow and then also activates something called mitochondria, which is how your body produces energy. And so what happens is people that work outside typically have more energy than someone who works inside under a cubicle. So then what happened is as I started diving in deep, I got into research, I started studying brain waves. And so I actually treat patients by putting an EEG on the brain, and I can actually monitor the brain waves. So what I would try to do is just have a patient sit down under artificial light. I would test their brain waves. And what would happen is they had a lot of high beta waves. And so high beta is basically when you're in fight or flight, when you're stressed out. So after a couple of months of doing that, I was like, this is very interesting. I was seeing patterns. So then I just cut the lights off and I just used a big red light panel. And what happened is I was reducing the high beta waves, the stress response in the brain. And so I was like, wow, this is crazy. So then what happened is I took my entire clinic and I completely got rid of all of the artificial light and just started using red light. And what happened is autistic kids started coming in a lot more calmer. I started seeing that patients were starting to sleep better. I had patients with chronic illnesses that were actually starting to start to get better and start to recover. And then I had patients who were having low energy. They started saying, hey, look, I'm noticing more energy throughout the day. And so then I basically got into starting a red light company. And now we sell these red lights all over the entire world and we educate people. But it's very fascinating that when you really look at the color spectrum, so we have red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, and violet. And when you go back to Albert Einstein's equation, 90% of the plus of the world is only really being exposed to nothing but blue. And so my personal opinion, I think that when you're looking at trying to treat healthcare issues, I think that we're failing in the healthcare industry treating patients. One is because people are not looking at the laws of nature. And one of that is actually light exposure. And I think that patients who have an insomnia, people who have fatigue issues, if they actually start to get their light cycle back, meaning if they wake up and watch sunrises, they spend at least 30 minutes to an hour a day outside in the sun, and then they watch sunsets. And after the sun goes down, we should actually minimize our light exposure. And so there's research actually at Harvard. Harvard has something called Circadian Rhythm Biolab. And these researchers are finding that when they basically use a lot of blue light, they're showing that it's actually stressing the brain out and it's increasing degeneration in the brain, which is stuff like Alzheimer's, dementia. And it's very fascinating. And so, yeah, that was kind of what kind of got me into studying light and how it impacts the brain. But what it did for me personally is it actually normalized my sleep cycle. And, I used to have to take sleep medications to go to sleep. And now I can completely sleep throughout the entire night.
Right, right. So anyone who has problems in terms of sleep, stress, or anything else, if they start going out in the sun, that will lead to much better outcome than staying indoors. Though we have been knowing about this, that you should go out and you will get it will be very good. But now even in this specific terms, when we are consuming so much of blue light in our day-to-day affairs, by staying indoors, that is going to help. Is that true? Is that clear?
It's correct. And this is the thing, is that people should wake up and at least go watch the sunrise, because that's going to set your day. That's going to give you energy. It's going to reduce depression and anxiety. It's going to reduce pain because of the natural way that, our bodies are built. It's designed that, we have a sleep cycle. Roosters wake up and crow basically before the sunrise. And then you start seeing that. I tell people this: animals do not really need a veterinarian until they become inside. Once they go into a home, these animals start to get sick. And you got to ask yourself, well, what's going on? And it's because you've taken that animal out of its natural habitat. There's grounding. The animals are putting their paws on the ground. human beings, we wear basically rubber insoles, which detaches from the Earth's frequency. And then we're living indoors all day long. We're not working outside. And so if people want to, and I've had patients that had like chronic insomnia, I'm in America, and, most of my patients take a crazy amount of medication. And my goal is to teach them the fundamental principles of life. And one of it is actually it's light, it's magneticism, grounding, it's water intake, and it's movement. And if we start to abide by these laws of nature, we can actually start to heal and recover even from some of the most craziest chronic diseases.
Right, right. So, in terms of intensity of the red light, how do you bring all that power of the sun into some sort of a red light, and that helps, almost equivalent to the sun? Help us understand this technology.
So we use a class 3B laser. So it's this little bitty handheld laser. And what we actually do is we run it over the whole skin. So your body's a solar callus. Okay. And, when basically light hits the skin, what it does is it helps your body start to produce energy and improves blood flow. And so if you start to improve blood flow, you can start to basically reduce inflammation, which is pain. It's basically how people get swelling. So what we do is we actually put these lights over blood supplies. So one of our main blood supplies to our brain is actually right here on our neck, called the carotid artery. So we put these lights right here. And the goal is to improve blood flow to the frontal lobe. And then we put light behind the ear to activate what's called the vertebral artery. And this is going to supply blood flow to something called the brainstem, which is where all of our senses are, our cranial nerves. And then we put blood flow directly, light over the abdomen area. So that way we can improve blood flow and circulation to our whole digestive system. And then we put it over the spinal cord, over the back. And our whole goal is to just basically use light to improve blood flow, activate, bring nutrients to organs and to nerves to try to help improve organ functions, nerve function, and brain function.
Right, right, Kyle. So people who know that, this sunlight can be useful, and they do try out, how do they know that, okay, this sunlight will not work, but your red light will work? How do they know? And then they go to you or anyone else who can treat them. How do I know that this is the boundary that can be that I can get treated by the sun through natural way, but it is not working? Help us understand that from the point of a common person.
Okay, so the first thing is that I think that patients need their vitamin D levels checked. So vitamin D is actually something that it's basically it's a very essential vitamin that we get from the sun. And so by having your vitamin D levels checked, that's one thing to actually see kind of what your light exposure looks like. So if you have low vitamin D, you need to get outside in the sun. So that's one aspect that you can, test basically from a metabolic standpoint. The second thing, what we do is we physically monitor brainwave activity. So I can show patients that, look, your brain basically has a lot of high beta waves because I use diagnostics to check the brain out. And then I show these patients by using my red light, or even actually patients that can even go outside in the sun. Like, I take people who are literally in wheelchairs in my clinic, and we actually, part of their therapy is outside. We use sunlight to the actual head and sunlight to the actual stomach, the abdomen area. And so what happens is I can quantify and show that I can change people's brain waves. I can relax the brain from looking at brain waves. And then I also run stool samples. And this is very, very interesting, is that when we run stool samples, there's a concept called the gut-brain connection. And so what we're seeing in patients is that they have a lot of inflammation in their GI system, and they also have something called abnormal bacteria. Okay, it's called dysbiosis. So I show patients that if you can actually do about 6 to 8 weeks of about 30 minutes a day of sunlight, actually to the actual stomach, that it's going to actually start to reduce your inflammation, and it's going to change your gut bacteria. So you're going to have less bad bacteria by using the sun. And it goes back to the concept of animals do not need a veterinarian until they actually come indoors under artificial light. So assessing your vitamin D levels are very critical to see kind of what your light exposure looks like. The next thing is someone can actually get something called a QEEG, a quantitative EEG. The third thing that you can do is actually do what's called a complete digestive stool analysis. And those are some three basic things that you can actually see from actually using light as a way to heal people.
Right, right. Dr. Kyle, in fact, should we know only about what blue light and red light? Are there any other types of lights that are either helpful or not so good for us?
Correct. So violet light is another phenomenal wavelength of color. And so violet light can actually help reduce pathogens, which are basically infections. And so what we typically tell patients is, I like patients to get sunlight to the eyes. I like it to get sunlight to the face. I like sunlight to the abdomen area. And, it's very interesting that there's basically a lot of patients out there who have underlying fungal infections, mold exposure. And it's because what's happening is patients are basically in, poor quality air. They're in water damaged buildings. And these patients don't realize that their sinuses can directly impact their brain as well. There's research that shows that Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, I've even seen all these autistic kids across the entire world actually test positive for what's called mycotoxins, mold exposure. It's very, very interesting. And so what's happening is that, because we're not getting a lot of sunlight to our actual faces and our GI system, our stomachs, we're actually seeing pathogens present in our sinuses and also in our digestive system. And those can actually be directly impacting the brain. So we actually use violet light in our clinic, red light, basically a violet light over the sinuses to reduce pathogens and also the GI system. So our predominant way that we treat patients is using red light, violet light, outside of natural sunlight. But those are my main three, basically three things that I use in my clinic.
Right, right. You are a chiropractor, and a lot of people, spinal cord injuries. Now, in terms of a lot of people work on our chairs, sit for a long hours and different postures in terms of putting pressure on our spine or spinal cord, whatever way we know it of. How can we take care of that? How does light impact that? Brain is still understandable. How do we connect that with the spine, which is very much there, but we don't generally take notice of?
Okay, so a lot of people actually start to develop disc injuries. So we basically have this little thin cushion between our vertebrae and our spine. And what's happening is people don't drink a lot of water. And so they're also not moving. So what's happening is these discs in our spine
I'm drinking water.
are actually getting dehydrated. And as they get dehydrated, the disc starts to actually shrink. And as the disc shrinks, what happens, it puts compression on these nerves. So people start getting these radiating pain down their legs or numbness and tingling, even neuropathy. They get numbness and tingling in their feet. And so what's happening is the disc is thinning and these patients aren't moving. They're not walking a lot. So there's really not a lot of blood flow and stimulation going into the spinal cord. So what I have patients do is actually you have two ways. One, if you can come into the clinic, we do red light therapy on the actual spine itself to try to help improve blood flow. Or second, naturally, what I have patients do is tell them to go outside and literally get on like a layout chair or take your shirt off and actually use the sun to actually stimulate your back muscles or your spine to improve blood flow. Because what happens when someone has a lot of pain, you can actually put heat over, your back. And what happens is you can start developing better range of motion by using just heat itself, because heat is going to open up the blood vessels and the arteries, and it's going to supply more blood flow. And as you bring more blood flow into the spine, you bring more nutrients, and you also reduce something called inflammation. So, when I work with spinal cord patients, what's happening is they're typically sitting all day long and they're not outside. So, and they're not moving. So if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you're not stimulating your legs and you're not stimulating your back, where are you going to get blood flow to the spine? And you're really not getting it. And so these patients aren't really getting any progression in their rehab. And one of it is because, they're not stimulating, they're improving their blood flow to their legs or their back. So one of the easiest ways to try to do this is actually legitimately getting outside and using light on the actual spine to start to recover. And then the other aspect from a clinical perspective is that physicians or physical therapists and PTs and chiropractors, if they actually start using red light to the actual area of injuries, they can start to improve blood flow, and that helps, reconnect neurons and nerves to allow for proper flow to potentially be able to use their legs again.
Right, right. Dr. Kyle, who is this red light not for? Are there any situations where people should not be using red light? Uh, or a lot of people say, use sunscreen if you are going. What is your outlook on sunscreens? A lot of times, because if light is good, then why do you block it?
Yeah, I personally don't agree with blocking the sun. I also don't agree with actually using sunglasses. I tell people, my patients, I say, look, the only time you should ever wear sunglasses is to take pictures and then take it off. Because what happens is this, is that when you put sunglasses on, your brain actually thinks it's nighttime. So what happens is you don't protect your skin anymore. So you can increase your chances of getting a sunburn by literally using sunglasses. It's very fascinating. I tell people that you should do something called solar shading. So if you think about a lion in the wilderness, what happens is that lion will go out into the sun and then he'll go back into the shade. And so that's one of the things that, I have 2 young kids and I don't put sunscreen on my kids. But what I do is I let them go out and play outside in the beach, and then I'll bring them back in, or we'll use an umbrella. Because what's happening is if you look at the actual skin itself, there's kind of skewed research, but typically under 30 seconds of any type of lotion applied on the skin, it can actually get absorbed and get into the blood system. And when you read the ingredients behind sunscreen and you Google them, it's kind of scary because some of the actual sunscreen chemicals are actually carcinogens, meaning they actually can contribute to causing cancer. And so if you put this on your skin, you're outside, the sun basically, increases the absorption of that into your blood system. And then again, that's a chemical, that's a toxin that could potentially, harm your body if you can't eradicate it safely. So I'm not a fan of sunscreen. I'm not a fan of sunglasses as well. I am a fan of actually solar shading, which is basically getting out in sun and then getting under umbrellas or going inside. And I think that that's a great way to naturally protect yourself, just like an animal, in the actual, safari. It's going to basically go in and out of the sun.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I asked, is this red light, when you say administer red light as part of your practice, then do you check anything that if there can be any side effects or any sort of the person might have allergy or any sort of a thing? I want to understand for people, especially in smaller places, when somebody recommends a thing like this, and they should also be aware about their own conditions, if there are certain conditions in which red light should not be used.
From a side effect or kind of precautionary or contraindication, as we call that, I typically avoid patients who have cancer or tumors. Just okay. Because, what's happening is that you're improving blood flow and circulation. So I haven't seen enough of research to make it to where I felt comfortable, putting red light or administering red light with someone who has a tumor or cancer. But I work with patients with seizures, people with really any kind of neurological disorder. And the only application that I do not use red light on is actually cancer or tumor patients. Outside of that, I tell patients that, it's just like being outside in the sun. But again, I avoid cancer patients and I avoid using tumors. And that's really my only contraindication where I don't apply red light.
Good. Great. So in terms of now, let's come to your company. What are you people doing at your company? You have got this Neuro Solution. You have also got the Neuro Sage, a revolutionary computer video game. It's very interesting that it can work for betterment of health in terms. Help us understand what you people are doing.
So basically, this was the concept, is that so the brain is developed and it basically functions off of sensory stimulation. And so what's happening is I wanted to look at the eyes, I also look at brainwaves. So my goal was to actually develop a computer software program that used variations of colors to the eyes as well as eye movements, and then also incorporating music therapy and sound. So we use brainwaves, we use something called whole tones, we use various acoustic frequencies. And then the other aspect was actually using red light. And so if we use our Neuro Solution lasers, we teach our customers, because we sell to actually direct consumers, predominantly off of patients, off of people off of Instagram or YouTube find us and they're like, hey, we're interested in this. So what we do is we sell these lasers to patients, but we educate them on how to actually use it. And we have this basic protocol, and one of it is just to do something called Russian blood illumination, or we teach our patients to actually, or even clients, to laser the carotid arteries to get blood flow to the brain, laser behind the ears to get blood flow to the brain, laser over the actual stomach, to try to improve blood flow to our digestive system. And then we actually have them laser their whole entire back, their spinal cord. And because of that, what's happening is we're seeing these patients all over the entire world with disabilities, kids with developmental delays, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, ALS, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, digestive, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, headaches, migraines, and chronic pain. We're seeing these patients benefit from basically using red light therapy and basically using our software NeuroSage, using colors to the eyes and sound waves in the form of also eye movements in form of video games. And when you combine basically light, sound, and basically movement, those are keys to actually make the brain recover, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So no one's really rehabbing the eyes. No one's really using, sound to actually heal people. No one's using light, and then people aren't teaching people to move. So we just kind of built into this whole kind of complex that was just basically through a cloud-based software in your own home on how you can basically start to recover from basically using the laws of nature.
Right. So this video game, how does that? Is it coming in a form of a different equipment, or you can use it on your computer or mobile phone?
Yeah, so you just download it from the cloud. So it's called neurosagehome.com. So you just download it from the actual cloud. And then once you get that, you just need to purchase some headphones and an Xbox controller. And so that's just it. So you just have a laptop, you download it from the cloud, you buy some headphones and an Xbox controller. And there's multiple video games, but the games are very interesting because the games are built off of how to enhance the left frontal lobe or the left side of the brain through using certain colors and sound out of the right ear. And then how you can stimulate the right side of the brain by using certain colors and then sound from the left ear. So what we did is we built this ability to where a patient can say, hey, I need more energy. And then what they can do is they can play this video game to activate the left side of the frontal lobe, which is like your gas pedal. Or if you have patients who have pain or they have anxiety, maybe they're like, really stressed out, then they can actually play video games to enhance function to the right side of the brain. And so, it's pretty interesting, but the games are based off of improving function to either one side of the brain or the other, or you can actually just globally improve overall brain function by using a combination of both.
Right. So suppose if I'm using it on a mobile phone, so one side, the good light is coming, on the other side, you have got the blue light from the phone. Will it be a case of contraindication? Help us understand.
Well, this is the thing is that, there's always good and bad with everything. And so my goal was to use technology as a way to improve patients' lives. So yes, there is actually, a negative impact from blue light. Patients can wear blue light filter glasses to negate that negative aspect. But my goal was to also improve a variation of colors. So it's not just, just the color blue from these screens. You're also getting, red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet. And then we're combining it with sound. And then our video games only last for 15 minutes. So, my goal was to hopefully minimize people's screen time to at least, 15 minutes of blue light exposure, in the form of these video games. And then you get outside and you get your natural light.
Right. This red light, are there other names to it so that people are more aware about this whole new technology?
So from a global research, it's called photobiomodulation. So that's where the research comes under, is basically photobiomodulation. And then there's something called low level laser therapy. And then you have red light therapy. So those are basically three scientific, terms that you can Google to research, about, laser therapy, photobiomodulation, low level laser therapy, to see how it can impact and improve your life.
Wonderful, wonderful. There is much to learn about all these things, but you have given quite a lot of understanding about how light influences our brain. So for more, people who would like to connect with you, learn more from you, what is the best way? And for people who would like to, connect for professional reasons, want to be your client, what's the best way to do that?
Okay, so there are a couple ways. So Instagram, I have a pretty decent sized following. It's called Dr. Kyle Daigle. So if you can basically, go to Instagram, and then in there I have a Popple account that has like a long list of everything, because I do coaching, I do training, we sell these products. We also have multiple clinics here in the United States. I have a YouTube page that someone can go to, Dr. Kyle Daigle. I have a Facebook page, Dr. Kyle Daigle. And then I have a physical clinic here in actually America. And so one way to reach out to that is actually from this phone number, +1 337 499 3162. I do actually have a decent amount of patients from India, also really heavily in the Middle East. And so people can communicate to us through either, regular mobile phone, we're on WhatsApp. And then my assistant, who books all of my appointments, can be emailed at tech, at uperformance.com. And we have 3 facilities in the United States. I have one in Atlanta, Georgia, Lake Charles, Louisiana, where I'm currently residing, Austin, Texas, and then I'm opening up in Dubai, potentially in March or April.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ.